Hello and welcome to episode 2 of the UFOcast Does Captain Scarlet, Winged Assassin. So this is our first regular episode of Captain Scarlet. We have that opening narration from Captain Blue telling us what the setup of the show is, and then we have an opening scene, and then we have the Mistron threat come through over the rest of the credits. This one's slightly interesting in that the Mistrons kick off their threat before the opening credits. They actually do something towards what's going to happen, and then they give the threat and kind of like, they've already tried it once and they've failed. I mean, in some ways, it's similar to the first episode in that their target is a person. It would seem from the previous episode that once they've failed in going after a mission, that threat is over, and they move on to the next thing. It's sort of, I mean, this is something that I think I've talked about before. I might have mentioned it on the UFOcast, that in part it seems that although the Mistrons are like, well, we're doing this for revenge, there is an element of playfulness to it, in that they have these amazing powers and you feel that they could do a lot more if they chose to, unless you kind of set some kind of arbitrary limit on their powers, like can they only control a certain number of people or things at the same time. It seems a bit arbitrary to say that. So it seems that there's an element of the fact that the Mistrons are playing a game here. So they decided that their mission last time had failed. The world president gets to live another day. And with this one, they're like, we're moving on. We're going to assassinate the director of the United Asian Republics. So it's a similar thing. It's a big political world figure in this future of 2068, I think. I don't know if that's explicit on screen. Obviously, Expo 2068 sets that episode in that year. So we're that far into the future. We have a world president. We also have this sort of semi-president-like figure of this Asian republic who is deemed worthy of being assassinated, and it's Spectrum's task to protect him. I guess there are two aspects to this episode. One is the sort of climactic bit where the Mistrons are finally carrying out their threat after having blown up the airliner. And that's very exciting. It's somewhat reminiscent, I suppose, of Trapped in the Sky with the first Thunderbirds episode, where you're trying to land the plane on the elevator cars. In this case, Captain Scarlet is trying to ram the wheels of the jet to stop it from crashing into the director's jet. Spoilers, he fails. We'll come back to the win-loss later, but that is a striking aspect of this episode, that this is our first regular episode, and Spectrum don't succeed. And so if you've just seen this first episode, you're like, well, what is the series going to be like if this is the first regular episode and Spectrum don't succeed? Like, how many times are they going to fail? This is not a cozy world of international rescue where the rescue succeeds every time. But the other aspect of the episode which I want to talk about is the return of Captain Scarlet to duty. So you have the continuation of what happened at the end of the previous episode, where Colonel White tells us that he's recovering to life, but he is not under Mistron control anymore. So you have that slight recap with Dr. Vaughn and Captain Scarlet. What does he remember? He doesn't remember anything of his time as a Mistron agent. And then there's this quite brutal speech, really, from Dr. Vaughn telling Captain Scarlet what his life will now be like. You're indestructible, but you will feel every bullet. Yes, he's indestructible, but he's not impervious to pain. I guess that makes his heroism all the more heroic. I think I said last week that Captain Blue is somewhat the hero. And this episode sort of starts out with the fact that of him in that mould, because they're sort of deciding, is Captain Scarlet going to be ready to go back on duty? And they don't know that, and so Captain Blue is given the mission. He's the one that's kind of in charge of leading this mission. He's the one that's in charge of the logistics when they get to London. It's only when they're in that situation in the SPV that they're trying to shoot down the plane. It's not working, and Captain Scarlet's like, I'm going to ram the tyres. And Captain Blue's like, well, that's suicide. And Captain Scarlet, well, for you maybe. And that is the point in the series where Captain Scarlet becomes the hero. He takes over command. He ejects. You see that SPVs have an ejector seat. He ejects Captain Blue, and goes it alone to ram the wheels. But you know from that previous speech from Dr. Vaughn, you know he's going into this with his eyes wide open, that this is going to hurt, right? If this goes wrong, and it does, he doesn't quite succeed and crashes, and we have a very unrealistic blood on his head, but blood nonetheless. So it's quite brutal, this show, at this point. And we've been told this is going to hurt. He will live on, but every time he goes through this, it's going to hurt. I guess that's something that Torchwood explored with the character of Captain Jack. My references largely start with Jerry Anderson shows and Doctor Who in the 60s, and I know that often that's not where things start. These things have precedent previously. I don't know. Are there indestructible heroes prior to that Captain Scarlet is a riff-off? Do let me know if you have any thoughts on that. I guess there's a sense in which, because of all that going on, not much actually happens in the episode, at least in terms of what the Mysterons are doing. It is simply, we are going to take over this plane, which I think is a slightly protracted scene. We're going to take over this plane and we're going to crash it into the guy, and that's our plan. There are no new Mysteron agents, as there are in other episodes. It's just Captain Black. And he literally stands and watches the launch of the thing, and that's it. But I suppose because the episode is also built around reintroducing Captain Scarlet to the organisation, it has to kind of take the time to do that. And so overall, I think it's another strong entry in the series, and really shows that this is not going to be all happy at the end of every episode. They're not always going to succeed. They are sometimes going to fail. And now it's time for this week's Spectrum Agent Report from Maynard in Australia.
Hello, Maynard here, reporting from Spectrum Sydney, although you can call me Captain Aubergine. I've been assigned Winged Avenger, one of the great episodes of Captain Scarlet. It's always highly rated by fans. Captain Scarlet and the Mysterons, one of the few children's shows that has multiple grisly murders in every single episode. But let's get to the opening for a starter. I have to address the feline in the room here. In the opening, the very spooky opening with the steps going down the alleyway, all of a sudden, someone steps on a cat. Whether that's Captain Scarlet, whether that's Ed Bishop in the voiceover booth, and suddenly an anonymous, partially seen assassin takes some shots at Captain Scarlet, all that appear to seem to miss him. They're taking hunks out of the bricks on the wall all around him, but no actual physical hits on him that you can see anyway. I guess the Mysterons must be really bad at darts. Winged Avenger is the Director General of the United Asian Republic. The Mysterons do one of their spooky messages played at half speed. This is the voice of the Mysterons, or as they prefer it,
this is the voice of the Mysterons.
They want to assassinate the Director General of the United Asian Republic. He's the leader of 200 million people, which is a third less than the United States is at the moment. And good to see Australian Charles Bud Tingwell doing the voice of Dr. Fawn, and there's even an Australian working in the control tower of London Airport. It's discovered that Captain Scarlet has retro-metabolism. That means after a couple of hours, after having anything happen to him, he comes back, even if it's completely destroyed or blown up. Oh, just a quick note of Colonel White's seats that he has around his swivelling desk operations system he has there. They just go down to the floor. That would be handy if you're having a meeting with someone and you just had enough of them. You could just dismiss them, and if they didn't go, you just put their seat down to the floor and they have to stand up and leave. Spectrum is running security for the Director General, but the Mysterons are one step ahead of them. Out over the Atlantic, we see DT-19 is made to crash with a complete systems failure. But I just want to point out how good in this episode the super marionation is. There's one part where Captain Scarlet is ramming the wheels of DT-19 on the ground and you see them bursting, and even watching it in a remastered DVD, it looks great. Great super marionation. And even in simple scenes like where Captain Black is watching DT-19 take off, he's just watching it from the airport tower. There's a guy reading a newspaper in the background. There's a couple of figures with him. Simple, great super marionation. Looks really good. But after the Mysterons crashed DT-19, I had a thought, if they could crash DT-19, why didn't the Mysterons just crash the Director General's plane itself when it took off? When they're backing the Octane truck to take the Director General to the airport secretly, there's a huge ad for cigarettes briefly spotted there. Good on you, 1967. And because of his experience of being a Mysteron agent, Captain Scarlet he gets the vapours. Whenever the Mysterons are near, you can see him, he just goes all funny in his water. And because of that, we know evil is afoot. So shock and horror at London Control when it's discovered that DT-19 is discovered to be completely empty. And they discovered it's a booby trap. You don't hear that expression used on the news these days very often, do you? All three angels are patrolling above the airport and take cannon shots at DT-19 with limited effect. In fact, one of them even misses completely. The Angel Interceptor, as far as I know, only has the cannon in the nose, doesn't have any missiles, which might have come in handy in this case. Although, when the SPV, with Captain Blue and Captain Scarlet aboard, comes close to fire at the undercarriage of DT-19, the Mysterons jam the firing mechanism. So Captain Scarlet decides he's going to crash his SPV into the undercarriage of DT-19. Captain Blue thinks this isn't such a great idea, mainly because he's still in the SPV, but not for long. Captain Scarlet activates something we've all probably wanted to activate at least once in our life in a car, an ejector seat for the passenger. Captain Blue's out of there, and Captain Scarlet is free to ram the SPV into DT-19. He does get DT-19 to crash, but in doing so, crashes into a radar hut and is fatally wounded. But the good news is, the Director General's plane safely leaves the ground. Bad news? It unfortunately clips the vertical tail fin of DT-19 and all aboard are killed. I wonder how that played in the debrief. Well, Captain Scarlet's okay. Everybody else, not so much. And the great line from Captain Blue at the end. Captain Scarlet, he didn't die in vain. Not like he's indestructible or anything. No, don't even think that. That's not what's happening here. He's dead all right. What a great podcast. Keep listening, people. Captain Aubergine Maynard, signing out.
If you'd like to be a Spectrum agent in a future week, please visit ufocast.co.uk/captain to sign up for one of the remaining slots. Let's look at the things that we are looking for in this series. Continuity-wise, yes, this has to come second. So you have to begin the series with Mysterons and Winged Assassin, because Winged Assassin is directly following on in terms of Captain Scarlet's continuity. New Mysteron powers. We have the destroying and recreating of a vehicle that they can then control. As I said last time, it's sort of implied in the Mysterons, but you don't see it happen. It could just be that they'd somehow taken that over, but in this episode it's more explicit. No, we've crashed it into the sea, we can then recreate that, as the opening titles now say. And I guess there's an implication that somehow remotely Captain Black being at the launch, looking at the plane, somehow the Mysterons influenced the engines so that they caused the plane to crash. As in other episodes, there's no sort of physical intervention where the Mysterons kill or destroy somebody more obviously, or where they take advantage of a freak weather event or something. This is more of a sort of, spooky, what have they done to make this happen? So I would count that as a new separate power that the Mysterons have. Mysteron still at large. Captain Black, obviously, he will continue to be at large. Is it a win or a loss? This is definitely a loss. The Mysterons succeed in killing their target. Spectrum lose this one. And then on the blog post, look out for Mysteron puppets. We don't really get a good look at the assassin in this, but he will return as various other characters in the future. It doesn't say anything, but this is the first appearance of that puppet. Obviously Captain Black as well. So thanks for tuning in for that episode of the UFOcast as Captain Scarlet. Join me next week for Big Ben Strikes Again.
So if you join Spectrum later, that means you don't get the good colour numbers. You don't even get brown. You'd get colours like Captain Coral, Captain Chartreuse, Captain Labrador, Captain Razzmatazz, Captain Goose Turd Green, Captain Bastard Amber, Captain Lusty Gallant. But as far as we know, there was no Captain Pooh Brown.